They marked you before you even understood why. There is a reason the attack started early, a reason the resistance has been relentless. This is not coincidence. This is targeting. You were not just chosen, you were set apart. And what you carry threatens forces you cannot see. Tonight, the truth behind your spiritual anointing is being exposed. You did not become a threat recently. You were marked from the beginning. Before you understood prayer, before you understood purpose, before you understood warfare, the resistance was already forming around you. Look at your childhood, the isolation, the rejection, the strange heaviness you carried that other children did not. You felt different, not superior, not better, different. There were moments when fear would come without explanation, night terrors, oppressive dreams, sudden waves of anxiety that had no visible source. You thought something was wrong with you, but something was wrong around you. When someone carries a dangerous spiritual anointing, the opposition does not wait for adulthood. It strikes early, because early identification means early interference. There were unusual conflicts in your family, tension that seemed amplified around you, misunderstandings that escalated quickly, authority figures who reacted strongly to you without clear reason. You were not simply hard to handle. You carried something that unsettled what was hidden. Darkness recognizes light before light recognizes itself. You may have noticed that when you entered a room, certain people reacted instantly. Some were drawn to you, others were irritated by you. There was rarely neutrality. That is not personality, that is presence. A dangerous anointing creates spiritual friction, and friction reveals alignment. Think about how many times you were misunderstood, how often your intentions were questioned, how frequently you were blamed for things that were not fully yours. That pattern was not random. When a person carries authority, systems attempt to suppress them before they mature. You were pressured to shrink, told to quiet down, told to stop asking questions, told to stop being so intense. But your intensity was not emotional instability. It was spiritual sensitivity. You could feel shifts. You could sense atmospheres. You knew when something was off even if no one else admitted it. And because you could sense it, you were a threat to it. The warfare around your early life was not proof of weakness. It was proof of identification. You identified as a carrier of disruption, a carrier of exposure, a carrier of breakthrough. Have you ever noticed how many times opportunities were blocked at the last minute? Doors almost opened, then suddenly closed. Relationships seemed promising, then collapsed without logical explanation. Momentum built, then something invisible interfered. This is strategic resistance. When someone carries a dangerous anointing, the opposition studies patterns. It watches timing. It anticipates growth. It tries to create discouragement cycles. Because discouragement is easier to plant early than to uproot later. You may have struggled with self-doubt for years, not because you were incapable, but because your confidence was targeted. If you ever believed you were ordinary, you would never activate what was placed inside you. So the battle focused on identity, confusion about who you are, confusion about where you belong, confusion about your value. That confusion was engineered because clarity is dangerous. Once you understand that the attacks were early because the identification was early, something shifts inside you. You stop asking, why me? And you start asking, what was seen in me? There is something about you that required suppression, something that required delay, something that required distraction. The enemy does not waste resources on what is irrelevant. Intensity follows impact. If the warfare around you has been heavy, it is because your future impact is heavy. The early attacks were not punishment, they were confirmation. Confirmation that you were set apart. Confirmation that you carry spiritual authority. Confirmation that your voice, your obedience, your presence carries weight. Now understand this clearly. Early warfare does not mean permanent damage. It means early resistance. And resistance builds strength when it does not destroy. You survived what was meant to silence you. You endured what was meant to break you. Are still here. And that alone is evidence that what you carry could not be removed. The dangerous anointing on your life is not loud. It is precise. It exposes lies. It confronts hidden things. It destabilizes spiritual darkness without you even trying. That is why your early life felt like a battlefield. You were not dramatic. You were developing. You were being forged under pressure. And the pressure was applied because something rare was forming. Stop seeing your early struggles as weakness. Start seeing them as proof of identification. You were attacked early because you were identified early. And if you were identified that early, then what you carry must be far more powerful than you were ever told. There is something about you that makes people uncomfortable, not because you are loud, not because you are aggressive, not because you are confrontational, but because your presence exposes what is hidden. You do not have to speak for the atmosphere to shift. You walk into rooms and something changes. Conversations pause, energy tightens, eyes observe you more closely than others. You have felt it, the subtle tension, the unspoken resistance, the sudden defensiveness from people who barely know you. This is not imagination, this is exposure. When someone carries a dangerous spiritual anointing, they disrupt deception simply by existing. Light does not argue with darkness, it reveals it, and revelation creates discomfort. Have you noticed how often people confess things to you without being asked? Strangers open up quickly, friends reveal secrets unexpectedly. People admit struggles they hide from others. Your presence pulls truth to the surface. But here is the other side. Those who live comfortably in compromise often react with irritation around you. You did not accuse them. You did not confront them. You simply existed, and that was enough. You may have experienced sudden betrayals from people you trusted, not gradual drifting, sudden shifts, allies becoming distant, support turning into silent opposition. That pattern is not random. Exposure triggers reaction. When someone senses that their hidden motives cannot remain hidden around you, they either align or they retreat. You have likely been labeled as too intense, too perceptive, too serious, too spiritually aware. But what they call intensity is discernment. You see beneath surface behavior. You detect manipulation before it fully unfolds. You sense insincerity behind smiles. And when you sense it, your energy changes. You withdraw, you become guarded, you refuse to participate. That refusal exposes the lie. A dangerous anointing carries discernment as a weapon. Not suspicion, not paranoia. Discernment. The ability to recognize spiritual currents beneath physical interactions. You may have felt drained after being around certain people, not physically tired, spiritually heavy, as if something was pulling on your energy. That is because your presence activates confrontation in the unseen realm, even when you are silent, even when you are calm, even when you are unaware. Darkness reacts to what you carry. And sometimes the people around you do not even understand why they feel unsettled. They simply know something about you makes hiding difficult. Have you ever been in situations where secrets were exposed shortly after you arrived? Scandals surfacing, truths coming out, hidden agendas revealed, and somehow you were present every time. That is not coincidence. The anointing on your life is not just for comfort, it is for confrontation. Not confrontation through argument, confrontation through revelation. This is why certain relationships could not survive around you, not because you failed, but because deception cannot thrive where exposure is constant. You may have blamed yourself for relational breakdowns. You questioned your tone. You questioned your boundaries. You questioned your expectations. But the deeper truth is this: your standard exposes compromise, and compromise does not like being seen. There is a weight to your presence, a seriousness, even when you laugh, even when you relax. There is depth behind your eyes. That depth makes shallow interactions difficult. You struggle with superficial conversations. Small talk drains you because what you carry is not designed for surface engagement. It is designed for depth, and depth forces truth. This is why you have few close connections but intense ones. Quality over quantity, because your presence filters. It separates authenticity from performance, and that separation is not comfortable for everyone. Understand this clearly. You are not called to please atmospheres. You are called to shift them. You are not designed to blend into deception. You are designed to dismantle it, silently, strategically, consistently. But here is the warning. If you are unaware of this anointing, you may internalize rejection as personal failure. You may shrink your discernment to keep peace. You may silence your intuition to maintain acceptance. That is dangerous. Because when you suppress discernment, you weaken protection. Your awareness is not accidental, it is assignment. You are meant to see, you are meant to sense, you are meant to recognize what others overlook. And when you embrace that, something shifts. Instead of apologizing for your depth, you steward it. Instead of questioning your instincts, you refine them. Instead of shrinking your presence, you anchor it. Because exposure is not cruelty, it is clarity. And clarity protects you from alliances that would corrupt your calling. The dangerous anointing on your life carries presence, and that presence reveals. If people react strongly to you without clear reason, do not panic. If deception collapses around you, do not apologize. If secrets surface in your proximity, do not shrink. This is confirmation. You carry a presence that makes hiding impossible. And in a world built on concealment, that kind of presence is dangerous. There were seasons when you stood alone, not because you wanted to, not because you were arrogant, not because you were unapproachable. You were separated, and the separation felt painful. Friends drifted, allies disappeared, conversations grew distant. You questioned yourself. You wondered if you were too much, too serious, too intense, too different. But the isolation was not punishment, it was protection. When someone carries a dangerous spiritual anointing, premature alliances can contaminate destiny. So separation becomes strategy. There were doors you wanted that did not open, spaces you tried to enter that rejected you, communities that seemed promising but never fully embraced you. You thought it was failure, it was filtration. Not everyone can handle what you carry, and not every environment is built to sustain it. Isolation exposes your foundations. When the noise is removed, your identity is tested. Who are you when affirmation is absent? Who are you when support is silent? Who are you when applause disappears? Those seasons were refining you. You were forced to develop internal strength. You learned to pray without validation, to stand without reassurance, to believe without visible results. That is dangerous maturity. Because when your confidence is no longer dependent on approval, manipulation loses power. Think about how many times you were left out, invitations withheld, opportunities overlooked, conversations happening without you. It stung, created questions. But what you did not see was what you were being spared from. Not every closed door was rejection, some were rescue. There were rooms that would have diluted your conviction, groups that would have normalized compromise, relationships that would have softened your standards. Isolation kept you intact. Have you noticed that your growth accelerated when you were alone? In the silence, clarity came. In the solitude, strength formed. In the quiet, discernment sharpened. You began to understand yourself in ways you never did in crowded spaces. That was intentional. Because before you can carry public authority, you must survive private pressure. Loneliness is one of the deepest tests. It forces you to confront insecurity. It forces you to confront fear. It forces you to confront the need to belong at any cost. And you faced it. There were nights when you felt unseen, unheard, forgotten, but you were not forgotten. You were being fortified. The dangerous anointing on your life requires stability. If you crumble under social rejection, you will compromise to avoid it. So you were trained to endure it. You became comfortable being different, comfortable standing alone in conviction, comfortable disagreeing when necessary. That strength cannot be manufactured in crowds. It is forged in isolation. There were also misunderstandings that led to distance. You spoke truth and it created tension. You held boundaries and it created separation. You refused certain behaviors and it created discomfort. But those reactions revealed alignment. Isolation exposed who could handle growth and who preferred stagnation. And sometimes you outgrew spaces that once felt safe. Growth can feel like abandonment when others refuse to evolve with you. But maturity demands movement. The anointing on your life does not tolerate stagnation. It pulls you forward, even when forward means alone. Here is the deeper truth. Isolation was building your discernment about attachment. Not every connection is covenant. Not every friendship is destiny. Not every opportunity is assignment. You learn to evaluate connections with wisdom instead of emotion. That lesson is priceless. Because once you understand that separation can be strategy, you stop chasing inclusion. You stop begging for access. You stop shrinking to maintain relationships. You begin to value alignment over acceptance. And that shift changes everything. You are isolated so your identity would not be shaped by popularity. You are separated so your authority would not depend on applause. You are refined so your voice would not require permission. This is what makes you dangerous. You are no longer desperate for validation. You are no longer willing to betray your convictions to fit in. You are no longer intimidated by being alone. That independence cannot be controlled, and uncontrollable conviction threatens systems built on pressure. If isolation has been your story, do not interpret it as abandonment. Interpret it as preparation. Because when the time comes for you to step into influence, you will not be swayed by approval or criticism. You will be anchored. You will be clear. You will be unshaken. And those who once misunderstood your separation will realize it was not weakness, it was formation. You were set apart. And sometimes being set apart feels like standing alone. But what you carry required refinement. Isolation was the fire, and you emerged stronger. There is weight in your words, not because you shout, not because you dominate, not because you force influence, but because when you speak with conviction, things shift. You have seen it. Moments where you prayed and the atmosphere changed. Moments where you confronted an issue and confusion cleared. Moments where you declared truth and fear lost its grip. That is not coincidence. That is authority. A dangerous spiritual anointing is not passive. It activates through voice. There were seasons when you stayed silent. You held back your insight. You suppressed your warnings. You ignored what you sensed. And situations deteriorated. Not because you caused it, but because you were meant to interrupt it. Have you noticed that when you finally speak, tension breaks? When you finally confront, clarity comes. When you finally pray out loud, resistance weakens. Your voice carries alignment, and alignment destabilizes chaos. There were times you minimized your words. You said, maybe I am overthinking, then maybe I should not say anything. Maybe it is not my place. But every time you ignored that internal urgency, something inside you felt unsettled. Because you are not designed to observe dysfunction silently. You are designed to address it. Not aggressively, not emotionally, but authoritatively. Authority is calm. It does not panic. It does not beg. It does not argue endlessly. It speaks and stands. And you carry that tone when you are aligned. There is a reason your prayers are intense. A reason your declarations feel heavy. A reason certain conversations become serious when you engage. You do not speak casually about purpose. You do not treat truth lightly. There is weight behind your sentences, and that weight exposes lies. You may have experienced backlash after speaking up. Resistance increased. Opposition intensified. Misunderstanding multiplied. That is predictable. When authority is exercised, opposition reacts. But here is what you must understand. Reaction confirms impact. If your words were empty, there would be no response. If your presence carried no authority, there would be no pushback. But there is pushback because there is power. You were not given discernment to stay silent. You were not given insight to hide it. You were not given conviction to dilute it. You were given voice for activation. There are environments waiting for your alignment, situations waiting for your clarity, people waiting for your courage. But here is the warning. Authority without discipline becomes recklessness. You must guard your words. Not every battle requires public confrontation. Not every observation requires immediate declaration. Maturity refines authority. You must learn when to speak and when to observe, when to declare and when to prepare. Because the more dangerous the anointing, the more strategic the warfare. Your words can build, they can dismantle, they can correct, they can release freedom. So steward them carefully. Have you noticed how certain people seek your counsel repeatedly? They trust your insight. They feel steadiness when you advise them. That is influence rooted in authority. You do not need a title to carry it. You do not need a platform to prove it. It operates wherever you stand, in your home, in your workplace, in your friendships. Authority is not location dependent. It is identity dependent. And when you fully accept that you carry it, something shifts permanently. You stop hesitating when clarity is required. You stop shrinking when conviction rises. You stop apologizing for speaking truth. Because you understand that silence in critical moments enables chaos. You are not anointed to blend into confusion. You are anointed to bring order. Your voice is not noise. It is interruption. Interruption of deception. Interruption of fear. Interruption of stagnation. This is why the enemy tried to attack your confidence. If you doubt your voice, you will never use it. If you question your authority, you will surrender it.
But now you see the
Pattern. You were attacked early. You expose what is hidden. You were isolated for formation. And when you speak, alignment happens. That is not ordinary. That is dangerous. The anointing on your life was never meant to remain dormant. It was meant to activate. And activation begins with acceptance. Accept that your voice carries weight. Accept that your presence shifts atmospheres. Accept that your history of warfare confirms your impact. You were set apart, not to hide, not to shrink, not to doubt, but to stand. And when you stand and speak in alignment, opposition trembles. Because authority recognized and exercised cannot be easily contained. You are not overlooked. You are marked. You are not ordinary. You are anointed. The warfare confirmed your value. The isolation forged your strength. The resistance revealed your authority. Now you rise without apology. You speak without hesitation. You stand without fear. And what once tried to suppress you will now recognize that you were set apart and you are dangerous in the spirit.